They said love couldn't exist in a world built on blood and betrayal, but they were wrong. He was a man made of shadows, a ruthless mafia boss who destroyed everything he touched until the night he met her, a fragile waitress with ocean blue eyes and a heart too pure for the darkness he lived in. But before we dive into today's story, tell me, where are you watching from right now, and what time is it where you are? I love knowing how far our stories travel across the world. Chicago after midnight was a song of rain and neon. The streets shimmered, slick with drizzle, as cars whispered by like ghosts. Inside La Verona, the oldest Italian restaurant on West Monroe, the smell of roasted garlic and red wine wrapped around the air like a lullaby for the lonely. Elena Moore moved between tables with a practiced smile and tired eyes. She was 24, but grief had aged her heart faster than years ever could. Her hands trembled only when she thought too much about her late mother, about the rent overdue, about the life she never asked for, but kept surviving anyway. That night, she noticed him. Table 7, a man who didn't belong in a place like this. His presence pulled the noise out of the room. He sat alone, shoulders broad beneath a black tailored suit that caught every flicker of candlelight. Around his neck, a golden chain gleamed faintly, not flashy, but heavy, like it carried history. Damien Cross. The name rippled in whispers through the staff. Some said he owned the city's underworld. Others said he burned it down piece by piece until only loyalty remained. To Elena, he was just another customer, until his gray eyes met hers. She froze mid-step, tray shaking slightly. Those eyes weren't human cold. They were wolf cold, sharp, watchful, daring her to blink first. She didn't. For a second, silence filled the space between them, charged and fragile. "Your order, sir?" she asked, her voice softer than she intended. His lips curved, not into a smile, but something darker. "You choose," he said. She frowned slightly. "I don't think that's how it works here." "It does tonight." Something about the way he said it made her breath hitch. She scribbled down an order just to escape his stare, but as she turned away, she could feel him still watching. It wasn't lust, it wasn't curiosity, it was calculation, as if he was trying to decide whether to destroy her or save her. When she returned with his meal, he was still silent. The only sound between them was the clinking of silverware. She placed the plate down gently, and he leaned forward, his voice low. "You don't belong here." Elena blinked. "Excuse me?" He tapped his glass once, eyes never leaving hers. "You serve people like you're apologizing for breathing. What did the world do to you?" Her chest tightened. "You don't know me." "No," he said. "But I'd like to." That was the moment the room disappeared. Just her and him in the dim, golden light, her pulse hammering so loud she could barely hear her own thoughts. She turned away before he could see the confusion in her eyes. That night, when she handed in her apron, the other waitresses whispered about him, how he'd tipped $500, how his men, dressed in black, had followed him out like shadows, how his car, a midnight Bentley, had waited with the engine humming like a predator's growl. Elena didn't think she'd see him again, but she was wrong. The next night, he was there, and the next, always table 7, always asking for her. He'd order the same wine, the same seat, the same quiet smirk when she tried to keep conversation professional. Slowly, his words became softer. He'd ask small things, her favorite song, her favorite place in the city, if she believed in second chances. She didn't know why she answered him. Maybe it was the way he listened, like her voice was the only sound in the world that mattered. One evening she dropped a tray of glasses. The crash echoed through the restaurant. Her manager's voice rose in anger, but before he could speak, Damien stood. "Put it on my tab," he said coldly, eyes slicing through the man. The manager backed off instantly. Elena's cheeks burned. When the room settled, she whispered, "You didn't have to do that?" "Sides." He leaned in slightly. "You don't like help, do you?" "I don't trust it." He smiled faintly, something dangerous behind it. "Then you've been surrounded by the wrong kind of men." His gaze dipped for a second, not in disrespect, but in fascination. like he was memorizing the tremor in her lip, the stubborn lift of her chin. For the first time in years, Elena felt seen, and that scared her more than anything. Night by night, the world outside seemed to fade. Her life began to revolve around his arrivals, the sound of his footsteps, the smell of his cologne, the heavy silence that always carried meaning. She told herself it was just work. But when he looked at her, she couldn't lie to herself anymore. He made her forget how to breathe. One night, it rained again. The restaurant was half empty, the lights softer than usual. Damien sat there, tracing a finger around the rim of his glass. "Tell me something real," he said suddenly. Elena paused. "Like what?" "Something no one knows." She hesitated, heart thumping. "I hate the dark, not because it's empty, but because it hides too many memories." He looked at her for a long time, then whispered, "Maybe you just need someone who's darker than the dark to keep you safe." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her silence said everything: the fear, the curiosity, the pull she couldn't fight. By the end of that week, her co-workers started teasing her. "Your Mafia prince came back again," one laughed. Elena brushed it off, but when she caught her reflection in the mirror, she saw the truth. Her cheeks had color again. Her eyes sparkled like they once did. Damien Cross was dangerous, no doubt about it. But danger, for the first time, felt like a promise instead of a threat. Still, part of her knew men like him didn't just show up in someone's life without reason. Maybe she was the next pawn in a game she didn't understand. Maybe he saw something in her, something useful or something broken. Yet when he looked at her across that table, she forgot to care. That night when the restaurant closed, she lingered near the counter longer than usual. The rain outside had stopped. The city lights shimmered through the windows like small flames. She walked out into the cool air, pulling her coat tighter. Her footsteps echoed down the wet pavement. Then came the low rumble of an engine. Headlights washed over her. A black car glided to a stop beside the curb, sleek and silent. Her heart skipped. For a second, she thought it was coincidence, until the back door opened, and he stepped out. Damien Cross. The wolf in the suit. His hair glistened slightly under the streetlight, his black jacket clinging to his frame, gold chain catching the glow. His gaze pinned her where she stood. "Elena," he said, his voice smooth but edged with something deeper. "You've been running from something all your life, haven't you?" She froze, the air thick between them. "What are you talking about?" He took a slow step forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "Let me protect you, even if it means from yourself." The sound of thunder rolled through the distance as she stared at him. A stranger, a savior, a storm wrapped in human skin. Somewhere deep inside, her heart whispered a truth she wasn't ready to believe. This man could ruin her, or save her forever. The thunder faded, but his words stayed in the air like smoke that refused to vanish. Elena's breath trembled in the cold night as Damien stood in front of her, rainwater glistening on his suit like drops of glass. The city around them buzzed. Cars, lights, people. Yet somehow, everything went silent. "Let me protect you," he'd said. Those words haunted her long after he'd driven her home that night. The next morning, she told herself it was madness. Men like him didn't protect people. They owned them. But when she stepped into La Verona again, the familiar scent of coffee and rain met her. And so did he. Damien Cross at toe. Abel 7. Again. He wasn't supposed to be there, yet there he was, watching her like she was the only reason he'd come back to life. He looked out of place in the warm, humble restaurant, his sharp presence slicing through the soft chatter like a blade through silk. When she approached, his eyes softened just enough to confuse her. "Morning, Elena. You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "I'm a man who doesn't listen well." "Clearly," she said, trying to hide the small smile tugging at her lips. He kept returning every day, no matter how busy his empire was, no matter what shadows waited for him outside those doors. He made time for her. And soon, the rumors spread again. The mysterious man with the gold chain, who could buy the restaurant with pocket change, kept coming for a waitress with worn-out shoes and a heart too soft for her own good. At first, he brought nothing, just his presence. Then came the small things, not jewelry or diamonds, but things that mattered to her. When her landlord banged on her door one evening, demanding overdue rent, a black car appeared across the street. The next day, the landlord avoided her eyes, muttering apologies she didn't understand. When she walked home from work late, she noticed men who followed her for money, or worse, suddenly vanish from the corners they used to haunt. She knew it was Damien, and that knowledge terrified her, because kindness from a man like him came with a price she wasn't sure she could afford. One evening, after her shift, she found him waiting by his car again, the streetlights painted gold over his dark hair, his expression unreadable as always. "Why do you keep showing up?" she asked softly, crossing her arms. "Maybe I like watching you try not to smile." "That's not an answer." He leaned closer, voice deep and smooth. "Maybe you're the only thing in this city that doesn't lie to me." She wanted to walk away, to tell him she wasn't the kind of woman who fell for danger. But when he reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, her hair, it betrayed her. It leapt. From that night on, something changed. He started showing her the other side of his world, not the violence, but the silence that came after it. He took her for drives down empty roads at midnight, to places above the city where the skyline looked like a field of fallen stars. And every time she asked, "Why me?" he'd just whisper, "Because you look at me like I'm still human." Their chemistry wasn't loud. It burned quietly. It lived in the air between them, in the way he stood too close when she spoke, in the way she caught her breath when his fingers brushed against hers. One night, she was closing the restaurant when he appeared again, this time not in his usual black suit, but a dark shirt with the sleeves rolled up, veins running down his forearms like lines of quiet strength. "Come with me," he said simply. She hesitated. "Where?" "Somewhere the world can't find us." She didn't know why she said yes. Maybe she wanted to see what it felt like to be brave again. Or maybe she was already falling. The city blurred behind them as his car cut through the night. The drive was long, winding, until they reached the docks. A private boat waited, sleek, quiet, floating beneath a sky that looked infinite. When the engine roared to life, wind rushed through her hair. She leaned on the railing, watching the reflection of the stars in the black water. Damien stood beside her, his gaze softer now, almost unguarded. "Do you always look for beauty in dark places?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "It's the only place I've ever found it." He stared at her for a long moment, the corner of his mouth lifting. "You're the calm I never deserved." Her pulse skipped. The words hit her deeper than they should have. And before she could think, his hand found hers. His touch wasn't forceful. It was deliberate, questioning, like he was asking permission to ruin her peace. And when she didn't pull away, he leaned closer, his breath brushing her ear. "Tell me to stop." She didn't. The kiss happened like a secret. Slow, deep, the kind that steals reason and replaces it with fire. His hand cupped her cheek, hers rested on his chest, feeling the rhythm of a heart that had forgotten softness. For once, Damien Cross wasn't the Mafia boss. He was just a man trying to remember what love felt like. The night stretched into something beautiful, laughter between whispers, warmth between danger. The stars above watched them fall for each other, and the wind carried the promise neither dared to speak aloud. Later, when the boat docked again, he didn't let her go. Instead, he drove her to his penthouse, a towering building of glass and shadows. The elevator ride was silent, but their hearts weren't. Inside, everything smelled of whiskey, cedar, and something distinctly him. The city glittered below like 1,000 eyes. Elena hesitated by the window. "This isn't me," she whispered. He walked up behind her, voice low. "Then I'll make sure it never hurts you." When his lips found hers again, it wasn't hunger. It was surrender. Every fear, every wound, every piece of her that she thought was unworthy, he kissed them all away. And when they fell into each other, it felt less like sin and more like finding home. Hours passed like moments. The night outside deepened, And for once, both of them forgot the worlds they came from, hers built on survival, his built on blood. When dawn finally touched the sky, Elena lay beside him, her head resting on his chest. His heartbeat was steady, calm, the sound of a storm learning to sleep. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Maybe you're not as dangerous as you think." He didn't reply. He just brushed his thumb over her hand and pulled her closer. It was the kind of silence that felt safe, the kind that could trick you into believing in forever. Morning light slipped through the curtains. Elena reached across the sheets, but the space beside her was empty. The air was cold, his scent fading. Panic fluttered through her chest as she sat up. The penthouse was silent. Then she noticed it. On the nightstand, his watch, his chain, and beneath the pillow, cold metal, a gun. Her breath caught. The man who made her feel safe was still a man who killed to protect. The gun's cold metal still pressed in Elena's memory long after that morning's sun rose over Chicago. She sat there, staring at the weapon, realizing how little she truly knew about the man whose arms had felt like safety just hours ago. The sheets still smelled like him, that blend of smoke, leather, and danger. But he was gone. No note, no message, just the echo of his absence. For 2 days, she didn't see him. Not a call, not a sign. The silence grew heavier than fear. When the world outside felt too loud, she would sit by the window of his penthouse and wait for headlights that never came. And then one evening, she fainted. The world tilted, blurred, then went black. When she woke, the room wasn't his. It was sterile, white, smelling faintly of antiseptic, and something sweeter, something like hope. A nurse smiled down at her gently. "Ms. Moore," the doctor said softly, "you're going to be fine, but you need rest, for you and the baby." The words hit her like a wave she couldn't breathe under. The baby. She sat up too fast, heart racing. What did you just say?" "You're about 8 weeks along," he replied. "Congratulations." Her hands trembled. A baby, Damien's baby. The thought brought warmth, then dread. The man she loved was dangerous, hunted, and unpredictable. Every night he disappeared, he came back different. Colder, quieter, his hands carrying invisible stains. She'd asked once where he went. He'd said, "You don't want to know." But now she needed to know. When she left the hospital, rain poured like judgment from the heavens. She pulled her coat, tight, walking through puddles, the city blurring around her. She thought about his voice, his laugh, the way he'd whisper promises in the dark. "You'll never have to be afraid again." Yet here she was, terrified of the one person who swore to protect her. By the time she reached his mansion, night had fallen. The tall gates loomed, and the guards recognized her instantly, letting her through. Inside, everything was quiet. Too quiet. The air smelled faintly of smoke and whiskey. She found him in his office, sitting behind his desk, staring at a file with blood on its corner. He didn't look up. "Damien," she said softly. He didn't move. "I need to tell you something." "Not now, Elena." His tone was sharper than she'd ever heard. "Please, just listen." "Not now," he snapped, his hand slamming the desk. She flinched. His eyes flicked to hers, and for a moment, guilt softened them. "I didn't mean—" Her voice trembled. "I'm pregnant." The room went still. He froze, hands gripping the desk. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw something. A flicker of shock, maybe fear. Then, without a word, he turned away. "Damien?" He walked to the window, staring out into the night. "You shouldn't have told me," he muttered. Her chest tightened. "What does that mean?" He didn't answer. The silence that followed felt like punishment. "Say something," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "Please." Finally, he turned around. His face was unreadable. No anger, no joy, just emptiness. "You should go home, Elena." She stared at him, her voice cracking. "Home? After everything?" "It's not safe here," he said. "Not for you, not for that child. You mean your child, she snapped. He looked away. It doesn't matter whose it is. The world I live in doesn't spare innocence. Her heart shattered quietly inside her chest. She took a step toward him, desperate. You said you'd protect me. His jaw clenched. And that's what I'm doing. No, she said through tears. You're running. He didn't deny it. That was what hurt most, the silence that followed. And her words. It told her the truth she didn't want to believe. Damien Cross, the man who made her feel like she could breathe again, was gone. She left without another word, her tears mixing with the rain outside. Behind her, his mansion loomed, a fortress built from secrets and sin. That night, he didn't come after her. Days passed. She tried calling him, but his phone went straight to voicemail. She'd wake in the middle of the night, clutching her stomach, whispering to the tiny heartbeat inside her. He'll come back. He has to. But he didn't. The city started whispering again, about gunfights, alliances breaking, blood spilled in alleys. Every rumor carried his name like a curse. Then came the news that changed everything. That morning, Elena walked past the small bakery she always visited. The television inside was on, a reporter's voice rising above the sound of traffic. She turned, half distracted, and froze. Behind the glass, the headline burned bright. Breaking news. Mafia kingpin, Damien Cross killed in explosion. Her heart stopped. She pressed her hand against the window, the world spinning around her. The screen showed footage. Smoke, fire, twisted metal. His mansion. Gone. People around her whispered, gasped, pitied. But Elena couldn't move. Her body shook violently as she whispered his name over and over. Damien. No, please. Her knees buckled, and she fell to the ground, the noise of the city fading into nothing but the ringing in her ears. Tears streamed down her face as she clutched her stomach, whispering to the life inside her. Your father's not coming back. But a part of her refused to believe it. Because love like that, no matter how broken, how dark, didn't just die in flames. That night, sirens wailed across Chicago. The sky glowed faintly red in the distance, the last ashes of his empire burning. As Elena stood on her balcony, wind tangling her hair, she swore she heard a voice whisper through the storm, low, familiar, and haunting. I told you, Elena, I'd protect you, even from myself. The world around her burned, yet Elena couldn't scream. The shock had numbed her senses. Smoke clawed its way into her lungs as she stumbled through the street, clutching her belly. Flames painted the night sky a violent orange, and the sound of sirens wailed like a funeral song. Somewhere in that chaos, the name tore from her throat, cracked and trembling. Damien! Her voice broke into the wind. She fell to her knees, ash sticking to her tears. The air reeked of gasoline and grief. People shouted, ran, pointed, but all she could see was the inferno where the mansion once stood, the place where he had kissed her, held her, whispered promises that now turned to smoke. She tried to run forward, but a firefighter grabbed her arm. Ma'am, you can't go in there. Her breath hitched. He's in there. Damien, he's inside. The man shook his head, his face grim. No one survived that blast. The words sliced through her like glass. She staggered back, one hand on her belly. Her knees gave out. The world spun and faded. Her last memory before darkness claimed her was the echo of his voice, deep, haunting, protective. I'll always find you. Days bled into weeks. The news ran the same story again and again. Mafia lord Damien Cross presumed dead after explosion in North Shore Mansion. They showed images of the ruins, charred remains, twisted metal. The media feasted on every rumor. He was betrayed. It was a rival hit. He deserved it. But Elena didn't care about the noise. She sat in silence, a ghost in a small rented apartment, holding her stomach and whispering to the life growing inside her. Every kick reminded her of him. Every heartbeat within her felt like a secret promise, a piece of Damien that still lived. She refused to believe he was gone. But denial could only last so long. Bills piled up, rent notices turned into threats. Her landlord, a bitter man with cruel eyes, sneered at her, demanding money she didn't have. One night, when the thunder cracked outside, he cornered her in the hallway. "You think you can stay here for free, sweetheart?" he whispered, reeking of cheap whiskey. She pushed him away, shaking, terrified, but something inside her snapped. "No," she said, voice trembling but firm. "You'll never touch me." She packed her things that night and left, barefoot, under the storm, carrying Damien's child beneath her heart. Lightning lit her path. She had no plan, no destination, only survival. Months crawled by. Her belly grew heavy and her body weak, but her will hardened. She found work at a small diner on the city's edge, cleaning tables, pouring coffee, hiding from the eyes that watched too closely. She lied about her name. She told no one about Damien. When labor came, it was violent, a storm inside her body. Alone in a dim hospital room, she screamed his name once more, like a prayer, and when the doctor placed a small, fragile boy in her trembling arms, time stood still. The baby blinked up at her with those haunting gray eyes. Damien's eyes. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she whispered, "Liam, Liam Cross." She kissed his forehead, promising him the world even though she had nothing left to give. For months, she lived only for him, waking before dawn to feed him, working nights to keep a roof over their heads, singing lullabies through her exhaustion. The city outside stayed cruel, but her small apartment became a world of warmth and whispered dreams. Still, the shadows never left her. Sometimes she caught men watching her from parked cars. Sometimes letters appeared under her door, unsigned, threatening. She burned them all, terrified they'd take Liam away. There were nights she sat by the window, rocking her son, staring at the city lights. "Your father wasn't a monster," she'd whisper softly. "He loved us. He just didn't know how." The world said Damien Cross was dead, a criminal who got what he deserved. But in her heart, he was still alive, somewhere, somehow. Years passed like blurred memories. The girl who once served tables and trembled at danger was gone. Elena had changed. Her hair was shorter now, her eyes colder, ocean blue but stormy, reflecting pain and strength. She learned to fight, to protect herself, to trust no one. Each scar, each sleepless night shaped her into someone new, someone the world could no longer break. But strength came at a price. She forgot how to laugh. She forgot how to love. Her heart became a locked door, and she threw away the key. Until one ordinary morning, everything shattered again. She was feeding Liam breakfast, pancakes and warm milk, when her phone buzzed. A news alert. She almost ignored it, but the headline made her blood turn to ice. Elena Moore to marry Don Valentino, Damien Cross's greatest rival. Her hand trembled so violently that the phone slipped from her fingers and hit the floor. Milk spilled over the table. Liam looked up, confused. "Mommy?" Her chest tightened. She couldn't breathe. The world seemed to tilt around her. Her voice was barely a whisper. "What have I done?" As she stared at the flashing headline, the lights in her apartment flickered, and from outside, across the street, a black car idled, engine humming softly. Inside, behind the tinted glass, someone was watching her. The black car idled beneath the streetlight, engine humming low, exhaust curling into the cold Chicago air. Elena stood frozen by the window, one hand pressed to the glass, her heart thundering. For a moment, the world around her disappeared. All she could hear was that steady rhythm, not from fear, but from something deeper, buried beneath years of pain. It was as if her soul recognized something her mind refused to believe. A man sat behind the tinted glass, his silhouette sharp, unmoving. He didn't step out, didn't call her name. He just watched, and when she blinked, the car was gone. Elena's breath fogged the window. "Get it together," she whispered to herself. "It's just nerves. It's just..." but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. Outside, the wind carried whispers through the alleyways, the kind of silence that came before storms. Miles away, in the heart of the city, a man stepped out of the same black car, his gloved hands trembling slightly as he reached into his coat pocket. A single silver lighter, a relic from another life. He flicked it open. The small flame reflected in his gray eyes. Damien Cross was alive. He'd been living like a ghost, hiding in the cracks of Chicago's underworld, hunted by those who once called him boss. The explosion that had killed him was no accident. It had been an execution order from within, a betrayal wrapped in loyalty, and he had let the world believe he died to protect the only person he couldn't lose. Elena. He had watched her from the shadows for 2 years. He saw her fall apart, rebuild, and rise again from the ashes like something fierce and untouchable. Every time he saw her smile, it burned him. Every time he saw her cry, it killed him. But tonight, the headlines had lit a new kind of fire inside him. Elena Moore to marry Don Valentino. He'd stared at the words until the letters blurred. Then the rage came, quiet, deadly, precise. Don Valentino, the man who'd betrayed his family, the man who'd ordered his brother's execution. And now, the man who thought he could touch his woman. He crushed the newspaper in his fist, veins rising along his wrist. "She doesn't know," he muttered under his breath. "She doesn't know who he really is." He stepped into his hidden lair, a dim warehouse on the outskirts of town. The air smelled of oil and gunmetal. His men straightened when they saw him. "Boss," one whispered, half in disbelief. "We thought—" "Yeah," Damien said quietly, taking off his coat. "Yves saw, Ryan did." He looked different now. The same sharp jaw, the same cold authority. But time had carved shadows under his eyes. Tattoos crawled up his hands and neck, dark symbols of vengeance. For 2 years, he'd lived like a phantom, rebuilding piece by piece what had been stolen from him. Now he was ready to return. His right-hand man, Marco, approached carefully. "If she's really marrying Valentino, you can't just walk in there, Damien. The man's got an army." Damien's lips twitched into a dark smirk. "Then it won't be much of a wedding." He lit a cigarette, the ember glowing in the dim light. Smoke curled around him like a crown of ghosts. "I don't want war, Marco," he said slowly. "But I can't let her belong to him. She was mine long before he even knew her name." Meanwhile, Elena sat on her couch, staring at the engagement ring on her finger, a ring too heavy, too cold. Don Valentino was charming, rich, and powerful. To the world, he was a savior. To her, he was safety. But something about him felt wrong. Sometimes, when he touched her hand, she'd feel a chill, like a warning from the past. That night, she couldn't sleep. The wind howled through the city like a cry she couldn't ignore. She looked at Liam's sleeping face, those gray eyes that mirrored a ghost she still loved. And deep down, she whispered, "Why do I still feel you, Damien?" Across town, Damien stood on a rooftop, watching the city lights flicker below. He pulled out a small locket, her picture inside, faded and worn. "She thinks I'm dead," he murmured, voice barely audible. "Maybe I should have stayed that way." But the moment he saw her photo beside Don's face in the tabloids, something primal awakened in him. No one would take what was his. Days passed. The world buzzed with rumors of the upcoming wedding. Valentino's men guarded every corner. Invitations went out to politicians, crime lords, and socialites. The ceremony was set to take place in his private estate on the lake, the same one Damien once used for meetings. Fate, it seemed, had a dark sense of humor. As the rehearsal began, candles flickered in the grand hall. Musicians tuned their violins. Valentino stood near the altar, smug and satisfied, his arm around Elena. She smiled for the guests, but her heart was elsewhere. Outside, the night grew restless. A cold wind swept through the trees. A figure moved through the shadows, silent as death. Damien. He slipped past the guards like a ghost, his steps measured, his face unreadable. Every inch of him radiated power and pain, the kind born from losing everything. He paused near the window, watching her. There she was, the woman he had loved, the woman he had left. She looked radiant under the chandelier's glow, a goddess wrapped in silk and sorrow. And next to her stood the man who had taken everything from him. For a long moment, Damien just watched. His heart ached, but his fury burned hotter. Every smile she gave Valentino twisted like a knife. Every glance felt like a betrayal, though he knew she didn't understand. He clenched his fists, veins pulsing, breathing slow and heavy. When she turned her head slightly, just enough for her eyes to drift toward the window, the world seemed to stop. Their gazes met. She froze. Her lips parted, her breath caught. No one else noticed. The music, the laughter, the whispers all blurred. Only those gray eyes staring back at her from the darkness. It couldn't be real. It couldn't. Her glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the marble floor. Damien took a slow step forward, his gloved hand brushing against the cold window pane. In the shadows of the wedding rehearsal, Damien removed his gloves, revealing tattoos crawling up his hands and neck. His voice was low, dangerous, and heartbreakingly calm. "She was mine," he whispered, eyes locked on Elena, "long before death came for me." The room froze after the glass shattered. The sound rang through the grand hall like a warning bell. Elena stood trembling, eyes locked on the window, on the shadow that couldn't exist. The world around her blurred, Valentino's voice, the music, the murmurs, all fading into silence. Only those eyes, those haunting gray eyes staring back at her through the rain-specked glass. Her lips moved soundlessly. It couldn't be real. It couldn't be him. But when she blinked, the figure was gone. Her heart pounded wildly as she stumbled backward, clutching her chest. I need air," she whispered to no one in particular. Before anyone could stop her, she turned and fled, down the marble stairs, through the heavy doors, into the storm outside. Rain poured like silver needles, drenching her in seconds. The cold bit at her skin, but her pulse burned hot. Her heels slipped on the cobblestones as she ran down the alley beside the estate, searching the darkness. "Damien!" she shouted, her voice breaking the night. "Damien!" Lightning tore across the sky, illuminating a figure at the end of the alley. Black tailored suit, gold chain glinting faintly under the rain. Her heart stopped. He took a slow step forward, rain dripping from his hair, water tracing the line of his jaw. His eyes, those impossible storm-gray eyes, locked on hers. Elena. Her name left his lips like a prayer and a curse at once. She shook her head, backing away, trembling. "No, you're not real. You can't be real." "I'm real," he said softly, voice deep, rough, broken by years of silence. "I'm here." Her tears mingled with the rain. "You died," she screamed, pain slicing through every word. "I buried you. I mourned you." He stepped closer, the sound of rain filling the space between them. "No," he growled, eyes blazing. "I lived for you." The storm swelled, wind roared around them, carrying pieces of their past, whispers of love, betrayal, fire, and loss. Her body trembled as he came closer. She could smell the smoke on his clothes, the rain on his skin, the danger in his breath. "Why?" she choked. "Why would you let me believe you were gone? Why let me suffer like that?" He hesitated, jaw tightening. "Because if I hadn't, you'd be dead." Thunder cracked overhead. Before she could respond, headlights cut through the rain. Black cars skidded into the alley, engines roaring. Damien's head snapped toward the sound. Get behind me, he ordered, voice instantly cold and commanding. Who? Valentino's men, he growled, drawing a gun from inside his jacket. He must have seen you run. Doors burst open. 6 armed men stepped out, their weapons glinting under the streetlights. The rain fell harder, the city held its breath. Boss wants her alive, one of them shouted. Damien smirked darkly, rain running down his face. Then he should have sent more men. The first shot cracked like thunder. Chaos exploded. Gunfire echoed through the alley, bullets sparking off the brick walls. Elena screamed, ducking behind a dumpster as Damien moved like a predator. Silent, lethal, precise. He fired twice. One man dropped. Another lunged forward, and Damien caught him with a brutal strike to the throat. But there were too many. He grabbed Elena by the wrist, pulling her behind him as bullets sliced through the rain. Move! She stumbled, soaked and terrified, clutching his arm as they ran through the narrow back streets. Where are we going? She shouted over the storm. Anywhere but here, he snapped, firing behind them without looking. They turned a corner, and a bullet tore through the air, hitting his shoulder. He staggered, biting back a groan. Blood blossomed against his soaked shirt. Damien! She screamed, catching him before he fell. He pushed her toward a doorway, grimacing. Go, keep moving. I'm not leaving you, she cried, dragging him through the door of an abandoned florist's shop. They stumbled inside, collapsing behind the counter. The rain outside turned the world into white noise. He leaned against the wall, breathing hard, blood seeping through his fingers. She tore off part of her dress and pressed it against his wound. You're insane, she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. You come back from the dead just to get yourself killed again? He winced but smiled faintly. I told you. I live for you. Her hands trembled as she pressed the cloth tighter, trying to stop the bleeding. The air between them crackled with the ghosts of 2 years of silence, love, anger, grief all tangled into one unbearable ache. Why? She whispered again, voice cracking. Why didn't you come back for me? His gaze softened, his breath uneven. Because the people who tried to kill me would have come for you next. I had to disappear. I had to keep you safe. She stared at him, her tears blurring his face. Safe? You call this safe? I lost everything, Damien. I raised our son alone. His head lifted slowly, pain flickering in his eyes. Our son? She froze, realizing what she'd just said. The silence that followed was deafening. Rain drummed against the window like a heartbeat. He reached out, his bloodied hand trembling as it brushed her cheek. You had my child? Her lips quivered. Yes. He closed his eyes, a single tear mixing with the rain on his face. Then I didn't just lose you. I lost him too. She looked away, chest tightening, anger flaring again. You don't get to mourn him, Damien. You left. He swallowed hard. I didn't have a choice. Outside, sirens wailed faintly. The city was waking up to another war. She finished cleaning his wound, the cloth now crimson with his blood. Her hands shook, her heart breaking all over again. He reached out, gripping her wrist gently, his voice low, raw, and haunted. Elena, he whispered, you need to know something before it's too late. She looked up, meeting his gaze. What? He leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear despite the chill of the rain. The man you're marrying, he whispered, voice trembling with fury and truth, killed the child's real father's soul. Elena froze, her heart stopping mid-beat. The words echoed through the silence. Sal, harp, as a blade. When she looked back at him, those gray eyes no longer held just pain. They held vengeance. The candlelight flickered weakly against the damp walls of the safe house. Rain hammered outside, relentless, as if echoing the storm inside her chest. Elena sat beside Damien, pressing a blood-soaked towel against his shoulder. His face was pale, sweat dripping down his temple, but his eyes, those cold, silver eyes, were burning with something far more dangerous than pain. Her hands trembled. You shouldn't be here, she whispered, her voice quivering between anger and disbelief. You were supposed to be dead. You made me mourn you, Damien. He winced, his jaw tightening. And what? Let you die with me? His tone was rough, bitter, laced with regret. If I hadn't disappeared, Elena, they would have come for you, for our child. Her eyes widened. Our child. The word hung in the air like a ghost neither dared to touch. You knew? She breathed, almost inaudibly. His gaze softened, for the first time since he returned from the grave. I knew, he said quietly. I just didn't know if he lived. His voice cracked on that last word, betraying the storm beneath his calm. Elena looked away, her breath catching. He has your eyes, she said. Liam, he has your eyes. A silence thickened between them. The sound of rain blurred into white noise as Damien's heart clenched. For years he had survived blood wars, betrayals, and the weight of his own name, but nothing had prepared him for this, the image of a little boy he had never held. I wanted to tell you, she continued, tears spilling down her cheeks. But then the explosion, the news. I thought you were gone forever, and I had nothing left to hold on to except my son. Damien swallowed hard, his throat tight. He reached for her hand, but she pulled it away, trembling. You don't get to touch me, she snapped. You left me to rot in fear, to raise your child alone. You don't get to walk back into my life like a storm and pretend it never happened. He didn't flinch. You think I wanted this? He shot. Back, voice low but fierce. Every night I dreamed of you. Every morning I woke up to kill the man who betrayed me. But I had to wait. If I came back too soon, they would have used you both as leverage. I had to disappear to protect what mattered most. Her chest rose and fell sharply. You talk about protection like it excuses everything, she said bitterly. But you never protected my heart, Damien. He looked at her, his eyes flickering with guilt. No, he murmured. I broke it, to keep it beating. The words hit her harder than any bullet. She turned away, covering her face as sobs broke free. He watched her silently, the pain in his shoulder forgotten. Minutes passed, heavy and raw. Then Damien spoke again, softer now, like a man peeling back his last layer of armor. Don Valentino. He's the reason I disappeared. He wasn't just my rival, Elena. He was my brother's murderer, and he knew about you. Her breath hitched. What are you saying? I'm saying, he said, his voice tightening. The man you planned to marry was the one who planted the bomb that nearly killed me, the one who's been watching you, waiting for me to die so he could have you, as a trophy. Elena's blood ran cold. No, you're lying. He leaned closer, his breath ragged. You know I don't lie about death. The truth began to unravel inside her mind, like a thread pulled too hard. Images flashed. Valentino's sudden kindness, his controlling tone, the way his men shadowed her every move. It all made sense now. Her pulse raced, fear and fury mixing in her chest. I wanted peace, she whispered. For Liam, for me. Damien's lips curved into something dark, tragic. Peace doesn't exist in our world, Elena. Only choices. And you chose to love me once. You knew what that meant. She looked at him, torn between rage and longing. And what do you want now, Damien? To take me back? To Rui? And the one chance I have to live without blood on my hands? He leaned in, his voice a whisper of danger and desire. No, he said. I want to ruin the man who tried to take my family. Their eyes locked. Two broken souls bound by something deeper than forgiveness. Then, faintly, in the distance, the crunch of gravel outside the safe house. Elena froze. Damien's hand instinctively reached for the gun beside him. His senses sharpened, the air around them tightening. They found us, he murmured. How? He pressed a finger to her lips. Quiet. The door creaked. Footsteps. Shadows moved against the window. Elena's heartbeat thundered. She grabbed Liam's locket from her neck, the only piece of calm she still had, and clutched it tight. Damien crouched by the door, eyes cold, ready, The silence between each raindrop grew unbearable. Then, a whisper came through the crack of the door. "Boss, she's here." Elena's eyes widened in terror. Damien's jaw clenched. He signaled for her to stay back, but before he could move, the window shattered. Gunfire erupted, lighting the room with chaos. She screamed his name as he tackled her to the ground, shielding her with his body. He returned fire, but blood splattered across the floor. Elena's hands trembled as she tried to stop the bleeding again. His breath came out ragged, yet his eyes burned like fire. "I told you," he rasped. "They won't stop until one of us is dead." Her tears mixed with rain as she pressed harder on his wound. "Then we fight," she whispered fiercely. "Together." Damien looked at her, and for a moment, despite the blood and smoke, she saw the man she once loved, not the monster the world painted him to be. He gave a weak smile, brushing her cheek with trembling fingers. "You were always stronger than you knew." The shooting stopped. The rain outside turned heavier, washing the blood down. The cracked floor. They sat there breathing hard, waiting for whatever came next. But then, from the doorway, a familiar voice broke the silence, smooth, venomous, and mocking. "Well, isn't this?" Elena turned her head slowly, and her heart stopped. Don Valentino stood in the doorway, gun in hand, smiling coldly. His eyes shifted between her and Damien as he said, "Looks like death couldn't keep you two apart after all. But don't worry. I can." The room froze in a single heartbeat. Rainwater dripped through the shattered window, each drop echoing in the suffocating silence. Elena's breath caught in her throat as she turned toward the doorway. There he stood, Don Valentino, in his immaculate black suit, dry despite the storm, a predator cloaked in composure. The faint smirk on his lips didn't reach his eyes. Those eyes, cold, calculating, flickered with satisfaction at the sight before him. Damien bleeding, Elena trembling. "Well," he drawled softly, his Italian accent curling around every word like smoke. "If it isn't the ghost who refuses to stay buried." Damien's jaw tightened, his hand flexing around the gun. "I should have known," he growled, pushing himself up despite the pain. "Only you would walk into hell just to gloat." Valentino chuckled, stepping closer, the barrel of his gun gleaming under the flickering light. "Not gloat, old friend, just admire my handiwork. You were always too hard to kill, Damien." Elena's pulse raced. She looked between them, her mind spinning. Friends. Once. That word alone made her stomach twist. She could see it now, the shared history, the buried betrayal between two men shaped by shadows. Damien's breathing was ragged, but his voice held steady. "You murdered my brother." Valentino tilted his head slightly. "Your brother chose his side. I just finished what he started." He smiled faintly. "Besides, he wasn't the only cross who betrayed family." Elena flinched at that, confusion spreading across her face. "What does he mean?" she asked, her voice shaking. Valentino's eyes softened, mockingly. "Did he not tell? You, cara mia. Your savior here was the one who brought my empire down from within. He fed my enemies information. For you." Elena blinked, her lips parting in disbelief. "That's not true, Damien." Damien's silence cut through the air sharper than any blade. He didn't deny it. Not immediately. He only stared at Valentino, fury and guilt warring behind his eyes. Valentino smiled wider. "See? Even your lover's silence betrays him. He sold blood for love. And now look at him, a wounded dog trying to protect the woman who will watch him die again." Elena's voice trembled. "Stop. Please." Valentino took another step forward, lowering his gun slightly as if savoring the moment. "You know, Elena, I almost admired you. The woman who tamed Damien Cross. The one he was willing to burn the world for." Damien raised his weapon weakly, his arm shaking. "One more step, and I swear." Valentino didn't flinch. "You'll what? Die twice?" The smirk vanished. His tone turned cold, lethal. "You faked your death, Damien. You ran. But this time you don't get to run with my prize." Elena's heart pounded. "I'm not your prize," she snapped, stepping in front of Damien. Valentino's gaze softened briefly, a look that chilled her more than his anger. You could have been. You were supposed to be mine, until he came back from the grave. Damien's voice broke through like thunder. Touch her, and I'll end you where you stand. Valentino sneered, raising his gun again. Then do it. Let's end this dance the way it was always meant to. The air thickened. The rain outside beat harder, masking the trembling of Elena's hands as she clutched the side of the table for balance. 2 men, 2 guns, 1 heartbeat away from violence. Stop it, she screamed. You'll kill each other. Neither moved, neither blinked. Then a gunshot. The world shattered. Elena gasped, dropping to her knees. Smoke filled the room, the echo of the shot ringing in her ears. For a moment, she couldn't tell who had been hit. Damien was still standing, blood dripping down his arm, his expression stone. Valentino staggered back, clutching his side, eyes burning with disbelief. You still aim like a devil, he hissed. Damien's breathing was uneven, his finger still firm on the trigger. And you still talk too much. Valentino stumbled against the doorway, laughing weakly, even through pain. You think this ends with me? My men are everywhere. You can't protect her forever, Cross. Elena rushed forward instinctively, but Damien pulled her back, his arm tightening around her waist. Stay behind me, he whispered, voice hoarse but steady. Valentino's gaze softened as he looked at her one last time. You don't understand yet, Elena. He's not your savior. He's your curse. Before she could speak, Valentino raised his gun again, a final desperate act. But Damien fired first. The shot tore through the silence, and Valentino fell, eyes open, rain splashing across his motionless face. Elena stood frozen, trembling, her breath ragged. The smell of gunpowder, the sound of thunder, the sight of death. It all swirled around her like a nightmare she couldn't wake from. Damien dropped the gun, his shoulders slumping. Blood ran freely down his arm, but he didn't seem to feel it. He just stared at Valentino's lifeless body, the man who had once been his brother in blood, now nothing more than a ghost in the rain. Elena's hands were cold when she reached for him. You killed him, she whispered. He didn't answer. His eyes stayed locked on the floor. He was already dead the day he touched you. She wanted to scream, to cry, to hate him for what he'd done, but the sight of his trembling hands broke something inside her. She stepped closer, gently pressing her forehead to his chest. His heartbeat was unsteady, wild, but real. I'm scared, she whispered. He wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. So am I, he admitted, but I can't lose you again. For the first time in years, she felt the truth in his voice, raw, wounded, unguarded. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. The world was closing in. Elena pulled away slightly, her eyes darting toward the door. We need to go. If the police find us here. Damien nodded weakly. There's a car behind the warehouse. We'll leave through the back. They stepped over Valentino's body, hand in hand, both soaked and silent. The storm had eased, but the air still carried the weight of what just happened. As they reached the exit, Elena turned back one last time. The flicker of lightning illuminated Valentino's face, that same twisted smile frozen in death. She shivered. Damien's voice was low as he guided her outside. He's gone, Elena. It's over. But deep down, she knew it wasn't. Not yet. Because as they climbed into the car, Damien winced, his body trembling, his hand pressing against his side. When she looked closer, her stomach dropped. There was blood, fresh, dark, spreading fast across his shirt. Elena's scream pierced the night as Damien's head fell against her shoulder, his lips whispering her name, before his eyes rolled back and everything went dark. The cold white light of the hospital felt unreal, too clean, too quiet for the chaos they'd just escaped. Machines hummed softly, the faint beeping of a heart monitor marking the fragile rhythm of life. Elena sat beside Damien's bed, her trembling fingers tracing the curve of his hand, the warmth faint but still there. His face was pale, lips colorless, and for a moment she couldn't tell if he was sleeping or drifting somewhere far beyond her reach. Rain tapped against the window, soft and steady, like the world was weeping with her. She leaned closer, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead. "You stubborn man," she whispered, voice cracking. "You always promised me protection, but look at you now." Tears slid down her cheeks, falling onto his wrist, where his pulse throbbed faintly beneath her touch. She could still feel him, still feel the echo of the man who once terrified the streets of Chicago but melted for her smile. Her thoughts spiraled, crashing between grief and disbelief. The gunfight, the blood, the sirens. It all replayed in her mind like a nightmare on loop. She remembered the way he collapsed in her arms, his voice fading as he said her name, the fear that she'd lose him again. It clawed through her chest until she could barely breathe. Now, as he lay there in silence, tubes and wires keeping him tethered to life, she finally let herself break. She pressed her forehead to his hand, sobbing quietly. "The doctor once told me I was dying," she murmured. "Said my heart couldn't handle any more stress. But then you came, and somehow you gave me life again." Her voice wavered, trembling like the air itself was listening. "You ruined me, Damian Cross. You destroyed everything I thought I knew about love, and yet I'd do it all over again." The monitor beeped steadily, one sound she clung to like a lifeline. She lifted her head and looked at him, studying every feature. Even in stillness, he was power. Strong jawline, dark lashes brushing his cheek, the faint scar near his temple from a fight he never told her about. She reached for his necklace, the thick gold chain he always wore, now resting on the bedside table. It felt cold, heavier than she remembered. She closed her hand around it. "You once told me this chain reminded you of everything you were bound to. Crime, power, revenge." She swallowed hard. "I wish I could replace it with something softer, something that reminded you of peace." A nurse peeked into the room briefly, giving her a sympathetic look before leaving her alone again. The night deepened outside, city lights bleeding through the glass like shattered stars. Elena stayed beside him for hours, her eyes never leaving his face. She hummed softly, an old tune she used to sing when she worked at the restaurant before. Her world turned into smoke and gunfire. At some point, exhaustion pulled at her. Her head dipped beside his arm, and she drifted in and out of shallow dreams. Dreams of their first kiss on the boat, the laughter between danger, the warmth of his breath against her neck. Then a sound, faint, broken, pulled her back. A groan. Her eyes snapped open. Damian's fingers twitched beneath hers. "Damian?" she whispered, breath catching in her throat. His eyelids fluttered. Slowly, painfully, he turned his head toward her. His voice came out rough, like gravel scraping against stone. "Elena!" Tears burst from her eyes instantly. She sat up, cupping his face with trembling hands. "You're awake! Oh God, you're awake!" He tried to smile, but it came out as a wince. "You never could get rid of me, could you?" She let out a shaky laugh, half sob, half relief. "You almost did this time." He blinked slowly, his hand lifting weakly to touch her cheek. "How long have I been out?" 2 days, she whispered. 2 days of hell." He sighed, his gaze softening. "Guess even the devil needs a nap." She laughed again, short, trembling, full of everything she'd been holding back. Then silence fell between them, heavy with unspoken words. He turned his head slightly, eyes searching hers. "I heard you," he murmured. She frowned. "Heard me?" "When I was out," he continued weakly. "You talking. About dying. About life. About me." He paused, a faint smile curving his lips. "You always talk too much, Elena." She sniffled, shaking her head, smiling through tears. "And you never listen." He let out a soft, painful chuckle, and for the first time, the darkness in the room felt lighter. But then his tone shifted, deeper, quieter. All the power I had, all the blood I spilled. None of it meant anything until I lost you. The weight of those words hit her like a storm. She froze, eyes locked on his. His voice cracked, raw and real. You were the only thing I ever wanted to protect, Elena. And I failed. Her throat tightened. You didn't fail, she whispered. You came back, that's what matters. He shook his head weakly. Coming back doesn't fix what I broke. Elena leaned closer, her voice trembling but sure. Maybe not. But it gives us a chance to start again. He looked at her, really looked, as if seeing her for the first time after years in the dark. The storm in his eyes softened, replaced by something fragile. Hope. Outside, dawn began to creep across the sky, pale gold filtering through the blinds. Elena brushed her fingers through his hair, her touch light as air. You're going to live, she said softly. For me, for Liam. At the sound of the boy's name, something flickered in Damien's eyes. Pride, guilt, longing, all tangled together. I want to meet him, he whispered. You will, she promised, when you're strong enough. He nodded faintly, his breath shallow but steady. Then his hand slipped from hers, resting weakly on the sheets. You've changed, he murmured. You're stronger now. She smiled sadly. I had to be. You weren't there. Pain flashed across his face, but she leaned forward before he could speak. Don't. I'm not blaming you. I'm just saying, I survived. Somehow. He closed his eyes briefly, whispering, You always were stronger than me. She brushed a kiss against his forehead, tears mingling with the faint sweat on his skin. Don't say that. We both broke. Just in different ways. He opened his eyes again, meeting her gaze. The intensity returned, the same fire that had once terrified her, now softened by remorse. Elena, he said, voice low, if I could change everything, if I could give you peace, I would. She smiled through her tears. You already did. You gave me Liam. You gave me something to live for. Silence hung between them, deep and tender. Then she reached for his hand, lacing her fingers through his. The steady beep of the monitor echoed like a heartbeat between them. She leaned close, her lips near his ear. Her voice trembled, but carried strength. If you ever leave again. He looked up, eyes glassy with emotion. Elena. She squeezed his hand tighter, her words barely a whisper. I'll follow you to hell. His breathing hitched, a single tear sliding from the corner of his eye as he whispered, Then hell just became worth surviving. The night that once swallowed their lives now feels like a fading echo. The sound of hospital machines has been replaced by laughter. Soft, innocent laughter, little feet tapping against wooden floors, and the faint hum of birds outside the window. Months have passed since the night Damien almost lost everything. He no longer wakes up in cold sweats. He no longer reaches for his gun before opening his eyes. Now, he reaches for her. Elena lies beside him, wrapped in morning light. Her eyes open slowly, meeting his. There's peace in her gaze, the kind that only comes after surviving hell together. Damien brushes a strand of hair from her face, whispering, You still look like the reason I breathe. She smiles softly. And you finally look like a man who knows how. Outside, the garden hums with life. The wind dances through the trees, carrying the scent of lavender. And there, in the middle of that garden, their little boy, Liam, runs barefoot, chasing butterflies. Every giggle feels like a hymn of healing. Every step he takes feels like forgiveness walking on earth. Damien watches from the doorway, arms crossed, quiet, humbled. The tattoos on his hands catch the sunlight, but their meaning has changed. They no longer mark his sins, they mark his survival. He used to wear darkness like a crown. Now he wears peace like redemption itself. Elena steps behind him, resting her chin on his shoulder. Her growing belly presses gently against his back. He places his hand over hers, feeling nung life, new life, flutter beneath. It feels unreal to him. A man who once bathed in violence now stands as protector of peace. She whispers, "Do you ever miss it? The chaos?" He exhales slowly. "I miss nothing that tried to destroy me." He turns, eyes locked on hers. "You saved me, Elena. Not by changing who I was, but by showing me what I could be." She chuckles, softly brushing his cheek. "You always had a heart, Damien. It was just buried under too many ghosts." The days blend into soft evenings, home-cooked dinners, lullabies, and whispered prayers. Damien spends his mornings fixing things around the house, the fence, the car, the little wooden horse Liam loves. Sometimes he stops mid-hammer, watching Elena hang laundry under the sun, and in that simple moment, he feels something more powerful than any empire he ever owned. Peace. One afternoon, the sky turns amber. The sun spills over the hills like a promise. Elena sits on the porch, her hand resting over her belly. Liam builds castles with his toy blocks, making tiny sounds of victory. And Damien, barefoot, wearing a white shirt and that old golden chain, watches them both like he's seeing heaven for the first time. He walks slowly toward her. Each step feels like a vow. He kneels before her again, just like years ago. But this time, his eyes are not filled with guilt. They are filled with devotion. She looks at him, surprised, her eyes glistening in the soft light. "Damien, what are you doing?" He smiles faintly, voice trembling with sincerity. "Marry me again." Her lips part in disbelief. He continues, "Not as the man who broke your heart, but as the man who learned how to love it right." Elena's tears fall before her words do. She cups his face, her fingers trembling. "I thought you already had all of me," she whispers. "I did," he says, "but I want to earn it this time." The golden sunset paints their faces in fire and gold. Liam notices his parents, runs toward them, laughing. He wraps his tiny arms around their hands as Damien slips a new ring onto Elena's finger. A symbol not of nurship, but of choice. The wind picks up, carrying the laughter higher. Birds scatter across the orange sky as if celebrating a love reborn. Elena rests her forehead against his. "I never stopped loving you," she says softly. He closes his eyes. "Then I'll spend the rest of my life proving I deserved that miracle." Later, as the light fades, they sit together on the porch. Liam sleeps in Elena's lap, his small hand resting on her belly. Damien wraps an arm around them both, pulling them closer. He stares at the horizon, the same horizon he once looked toward when he felt lost. Only now, it doesn't look like an ending. It looks like forever. The camera in your mind pans slowly, from their joined hands to Damien's golden chain glinting in the dusk. That same chain that once symbolized power now glows like a promise. It catches the last light of the day, a reflection of all the pain, the redemption, the rebirth. Elena's voice narrates softly in your mind. "The doctor once said I was dying, but love, even born from a sinner's heart, gave me life that never ends." And there, under the orange-pink sky, Damien kisses her gently, not with hunger, but with peace. The kind of kiss that says, "We made it." The kind of kiss that says, "This is home." The music of life swells, crickets, wind, and the soft hum of their breathing. And for the first time, everything feels right. Every tear, every scar, every moment of darkness led them here, to light. The camera slowly pans up, past the porch, past the laughing child, past the golden chain catching the sunset, and finally into the heavens glowing with a new dawn. A dawn not just for them, but for everyone who ever believed that broken hearts could still heal. The doctor once said she was dying, but love, even born from a sinner's heart, gave her life that never ends.